Howdy, mates. Good morning. How are we all doing? It is Tuesday, June 28th, 2022. And you could say that it is now approaching the end of May, or of June, excuse me. Where has the year went? It's been going by very quickly. So as you can see, we have a bit of a change of scenery. Reason being that I'm even up in this area is I actually had it was an eye doctor appointment. So I had to go up to St. Mary's, and I figured while I was up in the area, I would go and check out the Grand Lake. So yes, this is known as Grand Lake St. Mary's. And actually the name over several years was actually quite argued. This was once known as Mercer Lake. But the thing is, the lake covers both Mercer County and Auglaize County. So, basically then, it was settled upon a different name. Grand Lake St. Mary's. We're basically on the west end, so we're much closer to St. Mary's, but this same lake, or I should say reservoir, meets up with Salina, which is further to the east, or further to the west on the other side. Right now we're at the east bank, excuse me. So to start off, this reservoir that we're seeing right now, this did not always exist. Basically, back in 1837, basically up to 17,000 people were recruited, mostly German and Irish immigrants. So at one point, this was all agricultural land, just like the rest of this part of the state, practically. So between 1837 and 1845, all of this land here was dug out. And thus, eventually it became filled into a reservoir. So with that being said, back then, the workers actually weren't paid that well. Even though that was a lot of hard work. Because you figure back then, heavy machinery didn't really exist quite yet. So it all had to be dug out by hands. And it took a while to get it done. So, you may have heard me say reservoir a couple of times. So basically what once used to span here in this part of Ohio was something called gosh dang it. It was called the Erie Canal. So basically, it was a waterway that stretched from northern Ohio, close to Lake Erie, all the way as far south to the Ohio River. So basically, it was one big, it's called the Miami-Erie Canal. Yeah, there we go. I finally picked up on that. So basically, it was a transport route, for people to transport their goods, and was a form of transportation. This was basically before railroads and automobiles were a thing. So back then, common way of traveling was either by horse or canals. So essentially, what we're looking at is the Grand Lake served as a reservoir for extra water. It was like a storage, basically. So any water that was here in the canals that needed more water, the water usually came from here. And what's actually fascinating, too, I remember a couple of years ago, while I was camping in Fort Laramie, there's a neighboring town, New Bremen. And it was actually New Bremen that was the halfway point of the canal. And it was the highest point as well in terms of elevation. So basically any water in the canal south of New Bremen flowed to the south, whereas any water north of New Bremen always flowed to the north. So you figure all of these canals, they had these really cool mechanisms called locks. And there's actually a place too for any of you to visit. It's up by Piqua. It's a smaller town called Lockington. And actually it is at Lockington, I believe that's in Shelby County, you can actually find some remnants of the locks that I speak of. These locks basically refer to sections of a canal. So usually these sections would have to fill up with ample volumes of water, and once it met that requirement, the boat could gradually move whichever direction it needed to go. But another thing too about the Grand Lake is, you know, at the time it was actually considered to be one of the largest lakes in this region of the United States, besides, you know, the Great Lakes, of course. So it was used as a reservoir, and then around that same time, Grand Lake St. Mary's was actually one of the first offshore oil wells known in the country. They were here. So even in this area, oil was highly sought after as a commodity, and it actually still is to this day, even though there is no oil drilling that takes place here. But for the longest time, Ohio was they were like the king of the oil industry. But obviously that's really not the case anymore. So to mention about the dimensions, Grand Lake St. Mary's stretches about 9 miles east and west, so in terms of length, and then it's about 3 miles in terms of the width. But this lake carries up to 270,000 acres worth of water, and that's a lot. That's quite a bit of water. So I'm gonna break this up into a second video, you guys. Thanks for watching. Take care.